Hey there, everyone. Welcome. It's Lotus. I hope this is finding everybody well. So, today, one of the things that I have been pondering and really spending quite some time over the last couple years working with energetically on deeper levels has everything to do with as we grow through our healing journey, we start to come more into the heart center. And the heart center becomes its own, I don't know, I guess I kind of like to call it its own inner voyage with many layers and and textures and nuances that continue to evolve us, grow us, expand us into our capacities to love. And when I talk about love, right, when I say that, I don't just mean personal love, I mean more of a, divine love, or it can also be experienced really as divine neutrality. It's not the same kind of love that we get when we're in love, perhaps, with someone, or we love our parents, or we love our child, or I loved my dog Moki, things like that. It's a different kind of love that does not have an opposite. But I want to talk about not that state exactly, but parts of the journey and parts of the experiences as we move into that expansion. So those of you who follow me, who listen to me, clients of mine who are here, thank you so much. I appreciate everyone who resonates with what it is that I bring and share. It is all about embodiment. Those of you who might not be familiar with me, I really focus on our spiritual journey, not what's happening outside as much as what goes on inside. My mojo is all about the subtle realms and that deeper intimacy of direct experience or direct experiences through our awakening processes and some of the things that we may come upon through this journey that I don't really hear a lot of people talk about, and I haven't, over the years. And some of it really helps to ease the tensions, anxieties, helps to just support the recognition that things might not feel really comfortable, but you're on the right you're on the right track. That's what I always tell my clients, that after they hit a new next level, it's like, oh my gosh, but this is what I'm noticing, and this is what I'm feeling, and inside my body, this is what I'm sensing. And it usually is right at the right times that they're having these experiences. And so really we're always right on time. But I really believe that having a deeper understanding, having a deeper connection to these nuances is greatly supporting or supportive. So that is partly why this is one of my callings, and what I do and offer. So if you're interested in this, in all of this, the subtle energies and the subtle frequencies and how we cultivate and raise these frequencies and expand consciously, then please subscribe to my channel. That would be awesome. And thank you for being here. Okay, so let's talk about, we've all heard that term, I think, the power of vulnerability. And I think that the person who really coined it popularly was Brene Brown, I believe. And we're all doing our healing work, right? All of you who are interested in anything that I have to say, or most of us on these spiritual topics or different kinds of channels, you're doing the work. You're called to do the work. You're called to evolve, to transform, to get in touch with your own self deeper, to get in touch with the greater experiences of life with the capital L, with God, divinity, all of that. And as we do this, we are getting more and more in touch with higher frequency states of being and higher qualities, which is in fact expressions and qualities of our divinity. As we go through the healing journey, I think one of the most challenging areas is to really go through and hold ourselves tenderly through heart center purifications. And one of the initial areas that we start to land on is our vulnerability. Most of us have some kinds of protection, armor, hardening of the heart center that we have been conditioned into, that we've actually needed through maybe a large portion of our life. It serves a purpose, right, as our human development processes go. If we did not have ways to protect this part of us, it would be too much. It would be overwhelming. But as we get into our healing process, we begin to purify our heart center. We begin to peel away those layers of the onion and to reach that softer inside, cushy, warm, tender place within us. I'm a Cancer, so if anyone follows astrology, as a Cancer crab, Cancers are very emotional. We're very connected to our feelings, and we're very connected to our inner world. And yet, Cancers also have a tendency, because we're very connected to our emotional realms, to have that hard, crabby shell, right? To have that cover, and to keep that soft underbelly well guarded. And yet, there comes a time along our awakening journey and our travels that no longer serves us, because we're invited to live from more of a balanced, purified, open heart space. So I'm using the word purified because through our healing process, we start to untangle, we could say, like a ball of yarn, right? That's been kind of wound up, and it's not you don't just pull the string and it strings out or streams out evenly. It's like, oh my gosh, there's knots, or there's knots, and there's stuck points and things like that. So what we want to be doing is recognizing that as we move through our healing journeys, when we start getting connected with our inner child, for instance, with generational trauma, with our own trauma, that is directly connected to our heart space. And as we start recognizing and coming to terms with things that have happened, with things that we've believed about ourselves, about life, that we've been conditioned and programmed into in a myriad of ways, we start to kind of feel that our heart starts softening and opening, because layers of gunk is beginning to be cleared away. And yet, as that happens, it leaves us sometimes feeling exposed without the old protection mechanisms that we had developed in the past. So there can be that deep sense of vulnerability, of tenderness, of fear, of lots of flooding emotions. And, I did actually a video a while back, and I think it's called Is Your Heart Purifying? And that's a really good video for like a specific stage of our purification process. So I just want to think of how I want to put this across. So if you're watching, just close your eyes, right? Just close your eyes and put your hands on your heart. And I want to invite you to think about a moment in time where you felt perhaps really embarrassed or ashamed. And when you felt that, you felt this deep level of being seen perhaps, and maybe feeling judged, being looked down upon, being somehow perceived as being unworthy, or any other labels that you might have put on yourself. So usually it's these kind of moments, and there's never just one, but these moments in our early years where we start to put a shell over our heart, where we can even have a disconnection, that we even felt embarrassment or shame or guilt or whatever it was, and we immediately walled it off. And then we forgot about it because it might have been too painful, and then we go on our merry way. But that has now made an imprint, and that now has become a way in which we've learned to navigate the world with a more closed heart. Now, not only does this keep us closed off from things coming in that will hurt our heart, but it also keeps us from receiving love and loving more fully. As these layers begin to strip away, as we begin to heal and grow, we start to reveal the soft underbelly. And if we're not aware what's happening, we can quickly try to close it up, right? And put that shell back on. So why do I say if we're not aware of what's happening? Because oftentimes the sensations in our body that we start to experience when we are for the first time in our memory or in our known awareness, that we start to really feel our vulnerability for an amount of time where it feels unprotected, right? We might have somebody that hurts our feelings and we know it, and poof, we shut it right back up, right? And we go about our business because that's what we learned to do. But as we start healing, and as we've gotten to a certain stage in our development, we can't close it down in the same way anymore. It doesn't work, because now we're in a very different place, and we are in a different relationship to our soul and to life. And in that process, we get to explore what it feels like to be empowered by our vulnerability, to be empowered by our sensitivity, to be empowered by our tenderness. There's like this contrary experience, my guess is, that happens to some of us when I say all of this together. because oftentimes we feel very disempowered when our heart center feels too exposed. And yet, the trajectory that we're heading into is, how do I begin to live with an open heart without needing to wall it off? And normally what happens, not normally, but what can tend to happen along this journey is, this is assisted because we've learned how to love ourselves. The more that we begin to love ourselves, accept everything about ourselves, we've looked at our shadow, we've looked at our inner child, we've looked at our trauma, we've understood how to navigate all of that and come out through the other side for the most part. And then the next stage is, through that deep self-love, through deep acceptance, through deep healing, through deep valuing, and knowing our worth, we can then begin to live in our world, not feeling like we have to walk around protected. When we don't have a deep sense of our self-worth, of self-love, of self-acceptance, when we aren't really in a strong connection with our weaknesses and our strengths, then this feels very scary. But as we refine these foundational stages, right? Grounding and centering, coming into self-love is a foundational stage. Then we're able to start living from our heart and trusting our heart. So some of the sensations that we can start to experience, right, is that feeling of that vulnerability, and it can have a sense of really pulling us in, like deeper into our physicality, because we aren't trying to disassociate. We aren't trying to get away from the expectations, perhaps, that we are going to be hurt. When we're living in self-love, that is a form of power. And then we can drop down and allow all of us to stay present. And kind of to hunker downing. That's the way I experience it anyway, right? It's kind of like this hunker down where I get very present. I'm in my body, and yet I'm aware that there's this, it doesn't necessarily feel good, but it doesn't feel bad, if I'm going to label good bad. But it feels raw. It feels exposed. It feels tender. And then, how do we stay connected to that tenderness, that rawness, that vulnerable place, and not need to shelter it? Now, I'm not saying across the board that it isn't appropriate sometimes to, put a little tent back up, right, over this space. But the more grounded and rooted that we become, the more empowered and connected to our sense of self and our own truth and our own true essence that we become, we're not targets. Well, we might be, but we don't take on other people's projections. We don't take on their energy. We don't take on their thoughts or beliefs about us, right or wrong, right? Some people might think, oh, well, that person, she's not very responsible. That may be true. She might not be responsible. I'll just put it first person, right? I might not be really responsible. But the more that we know ourselves, that might be a little bit of a weakness, but yet I know that. So, and I'm not ashamed of it. So I don't have to take it on. I can be taking accountability for my own truth. And I can understand why I might not be responsible, or why or how I need to work towards being more responsible, or, I might have a different definition of what I'm being responsible to than somebody else's projection. So the more that I know me, and I love both my weaknesses and my strengths, and I'm taking accountability for myself, I am not going to be thrown into a depth of embarrassment, shame, guilt, or that there's something defective about me from anything outside of me. Instead, I get to go, either, yeah, that might be true, and I understand, or I can say, yeah, that's not mine to carry. That's not true. And that in and of itself, that embodied response becomes a natural, I don't even really want to use the word protection. It becomes a natural state of embodied strength, embodied clarity, embodied knowing. That means that I can stay open and loving, or open to love, or open to receive love, because of the earlier stages of purification. So I find that another quality that goes along with starting to live from a more open heart is humility. And those of you who have worked with me for years, who have followed me, will know that I work with the quality of words. I work with the frequency of words or language, and I work with cultivation of higher state of being words that we utilize in our English language. So the word that I really resonate with and that I have found true is just humbled. And that sensation of being humbled is not humility, even though at first it can feel like humility if that heart center has still got some distortions and tendrils that still need a little bit of TLC, right? We haven't quite healed it yet, but that connection to our humbleness can also feel very vulnerable, and that it, humility or humbleness we can look at as humiliation, right? So there's a sense, and sometimes it can be felt as there's still something wrong with me, or something was traumatically embarrassing, right? Where I felt so, humiliated in the sense of who I was. But when we start opening and living from the heart, humbleness can also have this tenderness that allows us not just to be right-sized, right, which is sort of what humility is usually, talked about as. The definition is like being right-sized. But humbleness, for me, also comes with, again, like this deeper neutrality. And there is no up or down from it. There is no good or bad. There is no, oh, I'm humble and then I'm not. It's like when it lands, it feels very solid, and it feels like a very balanced, neutral, deep place where we can rest. And there's a sense of not having a lot of fear. And when I say fear, I mean emotional fear. An emotional fear of being thrown around at the whim of other people's thoughts or projections towards us, or my own inner emotional instability or reactivity. So instead, there's this, right, this empowered place that we begin to live in and from. Now, does it mean that, I'll just speak for myself, does it mean that when I'm in these new states of being, right, where there is that, that power of vulnerability, or that power of being humbled and feeling really grounded and centered and opened and clear inside, does it mean that if I do something that's kind of reactive or embarrassing, that I don't feel it? I actually do feel it, but I don't have to berate myself about it. I can look with greater clarity and groundedness and self-love, like, what was it that instigated me to come into that reactive state? Because as soon as I, put that shell on again, I've lost the depth of my inquiry. I've lost the ability to do the deeper examination for clear seeing. But the more open that I can be, and the more I can feel into that softness, the more I can go, oh yeah, yeah, there's that. That's what I felt. Oh, I felt like I was being ignored, or I felt like I didn't matter, and oh, that's my story. And, so I can work with it without shutting down. And every time I do that, I get more skilled at it. And then I get more empowered by the new skills and by coming home to myself and staying embodied, rather than disassociating, rather than distracting myself, rather than shutting down on myself or negating myself. I start to become more of an open channel for life to move through, because this is one of our biggest places of guarding. As we continue to move into these next energies over these next couple years, for sure, the heart space is going to be called into levels of initiation. And to understand that there will be phases of living, feeling exposed, feeling a little hunkered down because you're really present now, because you're living it. You are owning your heart space. You are being accountable for your heart. And you also are learning how to appropriately support your own energetics, depending on how empathic you are, depending on how highly sensitive you are. But even with being empathic or highly sensitive, the foundational realm is still the same. Deeply grounding into who we are, to self-love, to our own truth, and to being accountable for all that we are, all that we think, all that we say, all that we do, and learning to purify the heart center so that we can actually live as love, for love, with love, by love, as love. That's it. All right. So I'm curious if anyone has any thoughts on that. Let me know down below in the comments if you'd like. So with love, I'm going to say ta-ta for now and many blessings.